Welcome to the Business of Story, where we connect you with the leading minds in the art of business storytelling. Learn from best-selling authors, Hollywood screenwriters, makers, content marketers, and brand raconteurs on how to craft and tell compelling stories that sell. The Business of Story is brought to you by Emma, which provides innovative email marketing tools and services that drive brilliant results. And by Convince and Convert, digital marketing advisors and counselors to leading brands and organizations worldwide. Convince and Convert helps you gain and keep your customers online. Here's your host, Park Howell.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another Business of Story episode. I'm Park Howell, and I am just absolutely delighted that you've chosen to join me again today for another episode. I think this is number 59. 59 different shows of bringing you story artists from around the world to help you craft and tell compelling brand stories that sell. We can all learn from these folks, and that's the most beautiful thing about my job is I take away so many notes and so many amazing insights from these folks who are so kind and generous to share their wit and their wisdom around storytelling. And we have a terrific guest today. Her name is Jennifer Keitt. Now, Jennifer has blazed the way for women in talk radio. She's going to tell you all about her story where she started in Chicago, and then she had to take a significant risk. She pivoted, and she is now one of the top on-air personalities coming out of Atlanta. She has 3 incredible radio shows, and today, Jennifer is going to share with us the importance of owning your story. Now, this occurred to me the other day. I was writing a blog post, and I was talking about the story cycle and thinking through, what more can I be sharing with brands to help them own their story? And this line of, nobody will buy into your story until you own it first, hit me right upside the head. I mean, it seems so obvious to me. And I'm surprised it didn't come around sooner, but it's true. All the folks I help, from solopreneurs to startup community to small businesses to professional services firms to even some of the large brands, including Coca-Cola and the Air Force, who have approached their brand story using the story cycle process. I see the same thing. Until you completely own your own story, it's nearly impossible to sell it to others, to get others to buy into what you're about and what you're doing. So today's show, Jennifer is going to take us through how to own your story. We're going to actually put her story through the story cycle test. We're going to touch on each of the 10 steps of the story cycle, and you'll see how her story, again, unfolds in this very universal structure to story. But in each chapter, there's a moral to it. There's something that we can all pull away that will help us and help you in really understanding and owning your story. Some of the main points that I loved coming out of the show is, one is you can't put new ideas into an old mind, into an old way of thinking. So if you want to pivot your story, or you're working with a brand that needs to up their game and up their storytelling, they can't do it with an old mindset. They got to look at it in new ways and moving forward. I know I'm experiencing that myself. I still get trapped in the old agency model of making money, when in reality, my whole new platform around Business of Story has opened up a universe of exciting ways that I can help people build their brands and, increase my revenue. But it's completely different than what I was used to doing, and yet I still find myself caught up in the old mindset sometimes, of the old agency model that just doesn't work, at least for me anymore. So you can't put new ideas into an old mind. Number 2, you can't be for everybody. You have to be for somebody. And it's her way of saying, we have to really focus our message, especially in this day and age of abundance. There are abundant people that do what you do. There are abundant people that do what I do. And the brands we represent, they come up against this abundance. So you have to figure out what your unique position is in the marketplace, who cares, who is the audience you serve best, and then focus your message, focus your stories to those folks and help them achieve what they want. Then they will go out of their way to achieve what you want. And Jennifer is just a wonderful example of that. And number 3 is kind of like number 1. you can't get new results with old behavior. So as you change your mindset, you also have to change your behaviors. And that's important for all of us, but it's also important in our customers and the brands that we all represent. We have to help guide them. Let them see their blind spots of how the old ways they're thinking, the old ways they're acting are not going to get them what they want into the future. So these are the stories that we have to own, we have to live into, and then make them available to others so that our audiences can make our stories their stories and they can live into and prosper from them. And finally, at the end of the show, I asked Jennifer, since she has an opportunity of talking to people around the country every night, and hers is a call-in show, so she's literally got a pulse on the American mind of what's going on. I asked her, what is the number one thing, that number one theme that you hear from all of your call-ins that are troubling people, that they're seeking, that they're longing for, that they're trying to attain, that they may be attaining through her work and through other work. But at the end of the show, you're going to find out what she said. What is that one thing we're all longing for? So let's get rolling. Let's jump into today's show with radio talk show host, speaker, empowerment extraordinaire professional, Jennifer Keitt. Jennifer, welcome so much to Business of Story.
I appreciate being here.
It's so great to have you here. I heard you at the National Speakers Association conference a month or so ago, and it was amazing. Your keynote was incredible, and then had a chance to go to your workshop. And now I'm going to be a little nervous today because your workshop was about interviewing, and I took a bunch of notes, but I'm not sure I got it all down, so this will be good practice for me.
You're fine. Thank you for having me.
Jennifer, you have an amazing backstory. Would you mind bringing our listeners up to speed on where you came from and you know, the trials and tribulations you went through to where you are today, hosting several amazing radio shows and having millions of followers? Give us a little bit of hint about who you are and where you came from.
Well, it all started in Birmingham, Alabama. Graduating from college and then 2 weeks later getting married to my now 30-year husband, Tony. But I think back to starting out, I was a broadcast journalism major working for a public radio station in Birmingham, Alabama. We got married and then moved and started the tour of the country, as I'd like to call it, and found myself several years later, maybe about 3 or 4 years in Chicago. Fantastic market, doing morning drive news, top of the world, really, literally, because, you know, Chicago is, I think, the number 3 market in the United States. And I can remember walking into the newsroom and thinking through where I was at that point in my life. 27, 28 years old, had the 2.5 kids, the white picket fence, the house, the job, the husband, and I was absolutely miserable. I remember walking into that newsroom that one particular day. It was the summer of 1991, and I knew I was done. I knew I was through. I couldn't continue doing what I was doing the way that I was doing it for the rest of my life. And it sent me into this tailspin, chaotic, dark moment. But out of that chaos, you know, at the end of the summer, I discovered a new voice, a new path, and what actually has ended up being, for me, very much purpose and destiny and fulfillment. Lots of things happened in between there, but it was when I was sharing at NSA, it really was that summer. It really was that turning point, that moment of really having to soul search to find my voice, to find my direction, and the lessons learned that really kind of brought me and put me and positioned me for where I am now and for what I am doing today. I didn't, thank God, give up broadcasting, but I changed my message. I changed my focus. I changed my direction.
And what was going on that required you to make this change?
Well, being that I was a morning anchor, my job was to report the news of the day. And what I've discovered about myself that I couldn't have learned until doing it for quite some time is I didn't like having to bring the negative news every single day. So when I found myself in that summer faced with the rest of my life doing it, I knew I had to change it. But there were mindsets that I had. They were old or established or current or the way it was being done. And up until that point, in my all 3-4 years of doing what I was doing, everyone did it that way. Everyone was a journalist in that capacity. But I was told that in my heart, I could not continue down this way. And so the mindset of it can only look like this, get up, do the news, go home, and start the cycle over again the next day, I knew that summer I could not, so I had to change my mind. I had to really change the way that I was thinking about what it was that I was going to be doing. When I was thinking about how I wanted to proceed, that's when I was hit with this idea. I don't necessarily want to stop broadcasting. I want to change my message. But the station had very strict parameters. And like I said, the established way of doing things was that journalists did news the way that the news was supposed to be done. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, I know that you think you want to do this new thing. You want to use your gifts and talents to talk to specifically the female audience that we have, but we don't do it that way. We don't stop down on a music-driven station for any amount of talk that would mean an hour or a half an hour, which were the standard mindsets, the standard way of doing things. And so they said, okay, you want to do a new thing? Great. We're going to give you the same 60 seconds that you have to tell a story with that's news oriented. You have that same 60 seconds to do with it as you please, but to create something that had never been at that point, up until that point in my career or the station's career, been done before. So the first lesson learned was that I couldn't put new ideas into an old mindset. Mm-hmm. My complete paradigm had to change as it related to how I was going to approach what it was that I was going to do.
So the theme of today's story is owning your story. And in this case, you were having to live into and work through someone else's story, the way it's always been done. And being the innovator, self-driver you are, that was no longer working for you. So you literally needed to create this new story for your own career, but you actually had to make your story their story. I mean, your leadership story, to get them to buy into it, just to open that door a little bit to allow you to do what you want to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you see that all the time? I mean, your work now is so much around empowerment of people. What is it that is required in owning your story to be able to do that and have the nerve, the guts to go out and do it? Because none of us are guaranteed of success, but you just know it's the right story and the right way to go.
Well, it's an interesting thought, an idea when you're talking about owning your story. My story up until that point had been, I had credentialed as much as I could. I went to college. I studied the craft. I had gotten good enough to be a morning drive anchor. So it wasn't that I was coming to them with some far-fetched, I want to start doing, rocket science, and have no background and no experience to do that. I stood on the credentialing and the experience and my story up until that point. So it wasn't that they were taking this huge chance on this unknown. It was really owning who I had become up until that point. And I think about so many people that are out there today, whether they be business executives or parenting, up until the point where you decide that you cannot do it the way that it's being done. Right now, at that juncture, I know that I had to own who I had become up until that point, and then tell the station or let the station know, hey, this is who I am, and this is who I want to become, and the two really have to work themselves together. But it wasn't like I didn't have any kind of background or any kind of story to begin with. So it's really easy to own who you have become. And the more that you own that, the more that you embrace that, I think it's easier then to sell your story, if that makes sense.
It totally does. And I have a saying that has come to me as of late, and it is, people will not buy into either your personal brand or your professional brand story until you own it first. You have to have the courage to own it, to believe in it, and to activate it. And you don't want it to become a tragedy or a comedy. You want it to be epic, but there's no guarantee that is going to happen unless you absolutely own that story. So tell us a little bit. You were credentialed. You had the background. You had the talent to be, a morning anchor on a major network in Chicago. So you had these strengths. What was the weakness that was nagging at you? You knew you wanted to do this, but what were you fearful of? Or what did you feel like you were maybe not quite equipped with yet that you had to strengthen to be successful in this new venture?
Well, Park, the reality of it was I had never done what I was asking them to do. And what I was asking them to do, I was asking them, okay, trust me with a moment of time, radio time, which is very valuable, to speak directly to about 60% of your audience. It was a complete unknown at that point. The reality of it is, with Morning Drive News, everybody gets it. The whole station, every listener gets that. So that really wasn't a risk. It was what we do. It's still what stations do today. Mm-hmm. But what I was saying is I'd like to change my messaging to only talk to women. and up until that point, that hadn't been done before. So it was absolutely scary. It was absolutely amazingly scary and scary. So I had the skill sets of what? Being able to communicate, being able to tell a story. But now I was moving into an area in which it wasn't going to be what the hot news topic was today, the tragedies or the deaths or the murders or the fires or things that were going on. I was going to actually begin to talk with women about their lives, about how they could improve their lives, about story that would be of interest, particularly to women. And I hadn't done that before. I wasn't even trained, so I thought, to do it that way before. So that, I think, was the biggest and the scariest part.
Right. And so what was at stake here, I guess, was your overall credibility as a news anchor, reporter, talk show host, because you had never done this before, but you felt like there was a need and an opening and a want in your listeners. So you went for it.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people relate to that in their own lives, really.
What year was this?
This was 1991.
1991. So this is all new territory for your employer, for yourself, and for your listeners. People just didn't have shows that were focused specifically on women. And here you are, as one of the prominent morning anchors. You say, I'm going for this. I want to start talking to these ladies, mano a mano, if you will, woman-y womano, if you will. So what was the inciting incident? Something had to happen. Was there that moment, that call to adventure, that you woke up one morning and said, I'm not doing this anymore. I am really going to go and do this other thing?
It really came to that. I don't know that it was a particular day as much as that whole summer, that season. And it was so poignant for me, being that I was a brand new mom. I had 2 small children. So the whole motherhood thing I was just in a complete new season all the way around in my life. And I think that summer, it was amped up. It was amplified. I knew that I wanted to be a great mom. I really wanted to be a great journalist, but I knew that the configuration that I was currently in was not going to take me where I wanted to go. And so that whole season of just really in that, staying in the tension of really discovering, hey, what would make me happy? honestly, for the rest of my life in terms of my professional career. And I had to really dig deep to discover and what was interesting was that the way that newscasts were done back then, we did the news, but at the end of every newscast, the way that station did it, we had the ability to be able to put in what we called a kicker or a feature story. It was usually that lighter information that this is what researchers say, or this is what, the firefighter that got the kitten down out of the tree, the feel-good story. I used to love doing those feel-good stories at the end of every single one of my newscasts. And I think when that light bulb went off that summer, being in that tension, the lighter, the information, I asked myself, what about that do I enjoy? Why do I like that so much? And that's really where this impetus for going and talking to women came from, because it wasn't doom and gloom, because it wasn't, the bad stuff that was happening in the world. It was a chance to talk about some things that people, might not have known about, but that were lighter, that were airier, that actually had the ability, maybe even, to change thought and idea. So putting those two together, but staying in that tension, that's really where everything came from.
I love it, that tension you talk about, because that is every part of every story. And as we are kind of going through the 10-step story cycle process here, we are in chapter 4 of tension, and you have to have that tension in order to live into something new, to break out of status quo. I tell brands you can't sell into status quo unless you are the low price leader, and who wants to be that? So in this case, in personal development, we all have these seasons when we wake up and, there's something, an impetus in our life that says, your personal passion is not currently driving your professional pursuit. In your case, you can just, when you're in the audience listening to you speak, you can feel this radiant energy of passion and positivity coming out of you. So I could imagine the doom and gloom every morning sitting on that set had a major impact. And now you've got 2 exclamation marks in your life in the way of 2 children that it probably wasn't jiving there. But my question for you is, we all have these seasons. What does it take for people in owning their story to embrace that tension and do something about it? Having the courage, digging deep to go for it, even in the face of naysayers.
You've got to shake it up. There's a quote that I love, that life begins at the end of our comfort zone. And when you find yourself in the comfort zone spot, and I was, by all intents and purposes, this was a very personal story for me, because on the exterior, it certainly didn't make sense. I told you I had all the little check boxes checked, and everybody was applauding from afar. Oh, yay, she's got all the check boxes checked. But for me, it wasn't right. It wasn't enough. It didn't feel good. And I was getting comfortable. Comfortability leads to complacency. Complacency drains you of your passion, of your energy. So life for me, I had to break free of that comfort zone. If you think about concentric circles, the comfort zone is right in the center. It feels really, really good. But life is way outside of those concentric circles in the atmosphere or in the stratosphere or, even in outer space. And I had to push free. You think about the rocket boosters that have to push the rocket, out of the atmosphere to get it into outer space. That to me is stepping out of our comfort zones. I could not stay there for me because I would have died. And I don't mean that literally, but I do mean that in every sense of the word, figuratively. My soul would have died. My spirit would have died. My passion would have died. And I still wouldn't have been. I don't think I could have been the mom that I wanted to be, or the wife that I wanted to be, or the contributor that I wanted to be to society. So it was imperative that I get out of my comfort zone. Scary, yes, but imperative.
So in the summer of 1991, you had this aha moment. You were in the season, you needed to move, and you went for it. Now, the universe is not cruel, but I think funny in some cases. Whenever we make that move, it always punches us in the nose. There's always something we didn't expect that came in our way that really tests our mettle and tests our conviction that this is what we want to do. What happened to you? Something must have happened, or a couple things. What were the obstacles and antagonists you had to immediately overcome?
Well, the first thing was that I had the choice of whether or not I was going to be paid in this new venture. Obviously, they'll pay me to do news. That's what the station does. But this was something brand new. And so the subject, when it came to money, how is this going to work? I had the option of selling my idea literally, for X number of dollars per week, or the idea of doing it on our own and syndicating on our own, which gave me control of my product. And that to me was one of those, punch in the gut kind of decisions, because obviously with young children and a home and a household to take care of, it would have made sense to just take whatever dollars they were going to give me. But when I really sat and thought about it, and once again, this is completely uncharted territory, something, that gut, that intuition said, but if I sell it for X number of dollars, then they're going to be able to own and do with it as they pleased. So I had the decision to make, and we made the decision, my husband and myself, to self-syndicate, which meant that we owned it, and that I could have never gotten to where I am today had I sold that idea and that concept and the name of the show and the way that it was being done, if I would have taken whatever dollars they were offering at that time and gave it away, is essentially. So with the self-syndication came ownership. And it was very interesting because years later, I've interviewed some of everybody, but one person in particular, I don't know if anybody remembers, when Montel Williams had his talk show. He came in, he was in the 90s. And I remember interviewing with Montel, and he told me, he said, Jennifer, I own my name. I own my show. I own myself. And you should always make sure that you own yourself. And I don't know if your listeners remember, but Oprah Winfrey had to buy back her name, had to buy back her story, had to buy back who she was from her syndicator, because in the beginning, the decision that she made meant that they owned her. And I remember very, very, very poignantly that was the biggest kick in the gut. And to begin with, what do you do as far as the money is concerned? And so self-syndication for me became freedom in order to being able to own myself and do with my property and develop it the way that I wanted to, and then be responsible for selling it to others.
And to own your story, be responsible for it. This chapter you're talking about right now is so interesting to me, because Joseph Campbell, America's foremost mythologist, who the creator of the hero's journey, which the story cycle is certainly inspired by, talks about, if you are in the woods on a well-beaten path, you are on the wrong trail. So that well-beaten path, to me anyways, for you, was that, well, I could just sell it, go in and do my thing, and it'd be the safest way to go. But you really forged out on your own and created your own path, which again, Campbell is very much the proponent of understanding what your story is, own it, be responsible for it, be accountable to it, and then have the character to overcome, the villains, fog, and crevasses that stand in your way to make that successful. So you are a very good example of that.
Thank you so much. And it's not easy, but I don't think anything in life that's worth having necessarily is easy. But there's many people out there that in your personal life or even in your professional life, you can relate. You have to make those decisions. And I look back now and I know that it was the right one, but during that time, it's really hard to know that the decision that you're making in your gut, based on what you just feel is right for you, is the right one.
Right. Now, none of us achieve anything of significance without the help of a mentor or guide. And since you are the protagonist in the middle of this story, and thank you for sharing it with us, who was there to help you? Now, Montel Williams gave you some insight and whatever, but was there one mentor that was really important for your success as you found your way, as you macheted your way through the forest, creating this new path for you and your story?
I don't know that there was one person as much as it was a team of people, like a board, a mastermind. I've been very, very fortunate in my career to have some really good people that have forged pathways before me, pathways that, radio program directors, who are the people who make the decisions on what goes on the radio, have had several wonderful, wonderful friends and mentors that were able to guide and to lead in that regard. So my mastermind team that has always been there, always surrounded, filled with people who have had experience in, what audiences want to hear, how to make your story, sell, how to market, how all those kinds of people that are professionals in their industries that have been there every step along the way. Even now, having people that I could call that have specific expertise in areas like syndication or in areas like, nonprofit development or whatever it is that I'm looking for. I keep a team of mastermind people who are professionals who have helped every step along the way. So yes, mentoring is very, very, very important. And I always keep a team, have been since that time.
And essentially now you are the mentor to millions of people, men and women alike. I mean, even though your shows are focused at women, you, from your talk at NSA, talked about the amount of male listeners you have and call-ins you have. So this next step, this road of trials from 1991, you launched this. Can you take us through how your career has blossomed since? What have you learned on this trail, and what were the victories, along the way that told you were on the right path? But in each one you grew. It became a launching point for the next chapter, the next cycle of your story.
So Chicago was most definitely the launch pad. And from doing that particular talk show vignette, I started to get a lot of requests for speaking at various functions. The community, once you open yourself up, they know that you're there. And I used to love to just go out and share, topics or speak. And it was really a hobby. It was fun. It was something that I looked forward to, because with being on radio, you don't get to see people.
Well, and you own the stage. I mean, you obviously really enjoy owning that stage.
Oh, I do. I really, and I found myself, in this love relationship with live audience. But like I said, it was just a hobby until, people started paying me to do this. And I was like, wait a minute, there's something going on here. So after Chicago, we moved, a couple years after that, we moved to South Florida. And then I had 2 more children. So I really had been just still doing what I was doing with the talk show. But remember, I own it. So I was still on in Chicago. Then I got to be on in Miami and on in other stations, on Buffalo and other places in New York. So the show was going very, very well. But this personal speaking really began to pick up. But more so than that, I really loved it, and started then in Miami in the South Florida area, hosting my own events and inviting women into my space and inviting them into, my story, talking to them about different kinds of empowerment ways, how to be professional women, how to, the things that women talk about, right? How to balance your career, the work-life balance thing, how to pamper, how to, all of those kinds of things really came to life for me in South Florida. So radio became my way of being able to market who I was, being able to say, I'm on the radio every single day. People were hearing, they were responding. And then I was able to utilize that to bring them into events that were specifically designed for them. It really was a very nice synergy that I had with audiences, being able to talk with them on the radio and then being able to bring them in to real life experience through events and workshops and seminars that we were hosting. Stayed in South Florida for several years. I think we were there for about 8 years with our growing family, and then moved here to Atlanta, which is where I've been based for the last 15 years. And once again, radio expanding, still with that same show that I started in Chicago, still on here in Atlanta, still on in South Florida, still on in other parts of the country. But here in Atlanta, able to expand even more by going on to, while that show was only 1 minute long, now I have 2 hours on the radio here in Atlanta. And then also every evening, my husband and I are able to do a romantic slow jam show that's broadcast here in Atlanta, and still doing conferences, still doing events, speaking that has really become, I can say, professional in that regard. So really taking one step after the other, the story has really exploded just from that one minute in Chicago that I started, back in 1991. I look back and I'm like, wow.
Follow your bliss and doors will open where there were only walls before. Another
Absolutely.
Joseph Campbell, quip, if you will.
Wow.
So you've got 3 primary shows, right?
Yes.
Today's Black Woman radio show. What's that about? I mean, it's pretty mixed, it sounds like, but I know it's much bigger than just the name.
Absolutely. It's the mama. It's the what I created back in Chicago to speak with women, in particular African American women. We cover absolutely everything on that show. It's really evolved. I used to do a lot more with interviewing people. All kinds of celebrities have been on. I mean, I've talked with all kinds of people that everything that has to do with childcare, that has to do with finances, that has to do with self-esteem, has to do with beauty, has to do with making sure that you get your professional life together, sexuality, relationships, most definitely marriage and dating, everything I am still covering because it's for today's woman. So as the years have evolved, today's woman has evolved, and I'm always talking to her in that respect. The talk show is on Sunday evenings and it has my name. It's the Jennifer Keitt Show. That too is a conversation, a 2-hour conversation with a live audience in which I am taking calls and talking to callers. This past weekend, we talked about frustration in the dating scene and how to avoid certain types of people when you're dating, whether you're young or whether you're more mature in that dating sphere. And this Sunday, I'm going to be talking about the United States of opinion. Whose opinion really doesn't matter, and why does it matter, and how do we form our opinions, and who gets to have an opinion about us and who doesn't. So it's a wonderful, wonderful, diverse conversation that I'm having every single Sunday evening. And then Tony and I do our thing Monday through Friday, 7 to midnight here in Atlanta, in which we're talking about love. We curate from our life, love and wine and going out and dating and kids and success and everything that we can think of that we've been experiencing over the 30 years together. We put together in that show Monday through Friday. So it's a very full experience in which several different times a day I'm able to talk with people on so many different levels. I am just very, very grateful for where I am.
And that last show is Slow Jams. Is that right? With
Yes,
Tony?
exactly.
Did he have a background in broadcast or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, he does. Tony and I met when I was a freshman in college, and he was working for the country radio station in Birmingham, Alabama. He was actually the 7 to midnight host for that show. His career started in country music, so I would go up to the station and listen to all the old school country. It is nothing like it is today. Alabama and Kenny Rogers and Willie Nelson and all those guys, that's how he started his career. But he went into management, so he's on the other side of the spectrum. But we got back together for this when the opportunity came at the station here in Atlanta.
Oh, that's fantastic. So to round out the story cycle in your life here, what is the moral of the story? What have we learned, or what have you learned in this process that we can take away from 1991 to where you are now?
It's really the 3 things that I kind of talked about at NSA, that A, you can't put new ideas into old mindsets. So you have to change your mind. You have to change the parameters by which you're either keeping yourself in boundaries. You have to break free from that. And then you can't be for everybody. You've got to be for somebody. I started my career when I shifted from being for everybody and just started talking to women. It doesn't mean that you limit yourself. In fact, being just for somebody in your story is for somebody. It might not be for everybody, but there is a somebody that you need to talk to. And I think that's really a big, huge component of my story. And then finally, you can't get new results with old behaviors. I had to change everything about how I approached what it was that I was doing. And I think the moral of our stories is that there is always, we want new results. We want to go to that next level. But sometimes those old ways of thinking that it's never going to change, or thinking that our story is a has-been story, that it's not ever evolving, that will never, ever serve us. And so we've got to be able to get those new results by doing things differently. And it might not be revamping the whole thing. It might, like for me, like my story, it might just be tweaking just a little bit how you're approaching what it is that you're doing.
Oh, that's great. I'd like to take a break at this moment for the stories from our wonderful sponsors that help make this show happen. And when we come back, Jennifer, I would love to dig just a little deeper in these three areas and pick your brain, since you certainly have the ears of many Americans around the world, or around North America anyways. Would like to dive a little bit more into what are you hearing? What is the angst out there? And what is some of the advice you are sharing with people that our listeners could take away to really help them own their story? So
Great.
Let's cover that right after these messages. Hey, if you like what you're hearing here on Business of Story, then you are going to love Definitive, the email from Convince and Convert that many marketers say is the most useful resource around. Each day, the team at Convince and Convert picks a topic and sends you the 3 best resources ever created about that topic. It's topical, it's timely, it's useful, so go to definitivedigest.com and subscribe for free right now. Hey, I've got a question for you. What's the best call to action button color on your website? Yeah, you probably didn't see that one coming, did you? Well, what's the best shape and sizes of your CTA buttons? And what copy gets more clicks? These questions have interrupted my sleep patterns for weeks now, until I downloaded a helpful new email marketing guide from Emma called Why We Click: The Psychology Behind a Great Call to Action. You'll learn how applying just a little bit of brain science can transform your CTA buttons into small but mighty conversion powerhouses. It covers the button color, copy, and placement that helps skyrocket click rates. Check it out at myemma.com/click. Emma helps marketers everywhere send smart, stylish email newsletters, promotions, and automated campaigns, and help us all rest a little easier knowing our email marketing is doing its job. So check out their new publication at myemma.com/click. You, like all business leaders and communicators, have an important brand story to tell, but it's probably not being heard. There's just too much competition for our attention, unless, of course, you tell a better story. For over a year now, I have connected you with more than 50 international story artists through this podcast to help you craft your ideal brand story for the growth of your enterprise and your people. Did you know I'm also available to you for speaking engagements, brand and leadership story workshops, even for one-on-one Skype or telephone brand story strategy consults? Plus, you can begin clarifying your brand story right now by downloading the interactive DIY workbook at businessofstory.com. You see, your sales don't have to be comedies or tragedies. You can make them epic by clarifying your brand story and connecting with audiences and customers like never before. So download your workbook today at businessofstory.com. And if you're not 100% satisfied, I'll happily refund your money. And one last thought. Just remember, the most potent story you ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a good one, my friends. Story on. Welcome back to Business of Story and our wonderful guest today, Jennifer Keitt, who is a national syndicated radio host, TV contributor, author, keynote speaker, and I can attest to her amazing keynote speaking ability after having just seen her at the National Speakers Association, and a life coach. And the interesting thing about that life coach side of it is you are literally life coach to millions of people because you have access to them through your various radio shows. So
yes.
What is it you're hearing? Maybe that's that universal question. What do people seem to be really struggling with in today's story, or the stories they're telling themselves about what's happening in their lives today?
I think if I were to really sum it up with one word, I think it would be significance. People want to have a significant impact in their lives, first personally, and then I think for the world. A lot of times people find themselves in this, struggle to make impact, if for lack of a better way of saying it, whether it be, with your children. How do you know that you're significant or enough to them to influence them to do and to be who you know that they need to become? This idea of being significant enough on your jobs. How can you have impact, not only to receive monetary benefit, but to actually make change? It's interesting. I have conversations with my kids. They're all adults now, 21 to 28 years old. But my son in particular, he talks to me on his way to work every morning. And it's really interesting because he's like, Mom, and he's 22 already, got a great job in Charlotte, but he's still talking about, Mom, I want to make a difference. I see even now he's still talking about what his future impact is going to be. I hear that not only from my own children, but from my listening audience week in and week out. I want to have significance in my relationships. I want to have significance with my finances. I want to have significance in my professional development. I want to have significance, just to be okay in my mind, to have peace of mind. So it's really this idea, how can I be significant, not only to myself, but to those that are in my immediate world and in my immediate circle? How do I make that happen? That's the biggest question I think I'm tackling all the time.
And is that something new? And if so, why do you think that is? Why has significance become so important?
Well, you think about it, just let's talk about it from a social media component. Mm-hmm. We've got this amazing tool. Facebook just kind of turned our worlds upside down. And now we can see in living color every moment of every day, everything and everybody. And so I think that we're really now searching for our place in the world. Yeah, I do think that it is a new thing not to be significant. I think we've always wanted that, but I think the drive to be significant is even more prevalent now because of the social media interconnectivity global environment that we find ourselves in. All I can do, I can get on my phone and scroll and I can see supposedly everyone else's significance. So it makes me ask, what am I doing? What about me? How am I contributing, in the grand scheme of things? I really do believe that this is a product of the 21st century. I do.
I think you're so spot on. I'm, one of 7 kids. And as they say, every child takes a role within the family. And in my own little world, I went to advertising, marketing, creativity, and that was my role, completely different than my siblings. I looked around at all my friends and I was completely different than all my friends. And even the folks that I studied with and we graduated, very few of us actually went on to the advertising, marketing world and whatever. And so for 30 years, I'm thinking, wow, this is pretty significant. I'm doing something very unique out there until social media comes along. And then you look around and there's 10 million of me out there. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm not so special after all. So I totally get that.
I think that's really true. And I kind of drilling down and helping people to understand we really are okay. It's okay because we have our own story. And I'm not saying that in a patronizing kind of way, because I think that each one of our stories are unique and significant. I do. And I think going back to what you're talking about here, owning that story gives you that sense of peace that I am okay and I am significant.
Yeah, I think you absolutely have to. And you hear that a lot when people, write a book, get it out there, let people know what your thoughts are. And the argument can be, well, there are so many books. I mean, and so many books, even about the topic that I talk about, that I don't have something that is unique. And yet it's everybody has something unique. Be yourself, and you have no competition. I heard someone say the other day, and I loved it, probably at NSA, and that you do have something to say, but you have to own it. You have to believe in it. And in owning it means you have to be accountable to it. So whether you're successful or a failure, it doesn't matter as long as you're accountable for it and keep moving forward. Mm-hmm. What, in final thoughts here, what are some things, in addition to those 3 wonderful points you shared earlier, what could we do right now, after we're done listening to this show, to find that significance or to find and own our voice a little bit more, even if it's in incremental steps, which all progress is, to start making that impact that we really want to make?
I think it starts first with, as I talked about earlier, stepping out of your own comfort zone, understanding that you have been placed here, I believe, to help people, to dream and to live bigger. And when I say that, I mean starting with your own, right? Your own family, your own friend circle, your own professional contacts. Help them to dream and live lives that are larger than what they are doing right now. And you can only do that when you've started that process yourself. It's that spillover effect, educating people, especially today, on how to love each other. Now, I don't want to say that so mushy gushy. It seems like it seems like such a non-business word, but it is. One of my favorite authors, John Hope Bryant, talks about love leadership. It is powerful when you really are leading from that place of okayness and significance, which honestly is love. I think that that's an excellent thing that we can begin to do, and then help people with giving them tools and productivity, like you're doing here with this podcast, of how to make significant impact in their own lives and in their stories and with the people that they are in contact with. And then finally, encouraging, which is what I love to be able to do, encouraging other people. I think that we all can do that to let them know, like we're doing here now, you can do it. Yes, you can. You can be the person you want to be or have the success that you want to have as you begin to break open your story and share it with other people.
Jennifer, how can we learn more about you? I mean, you have so much to share. Where can we send people so that they can learn? And I want to know about your 1,000 Ambassador Army. What is that about? Oh, my
gosh. I am mobilizing women. We are up to about 60 or 70 of them now in our community. I've got a long way to go, but I am a big visionary, so that keeps me moving. But these are women that have partnered with me and my nonprofit to do just the things that we're talking about, empower other women and educate them and equip and encourage them, because I believe in numbers we can have more significant impact. That 1,000 Ambassador Army are women who have said, you know what, I believe in the work that you're doing. I'm doing my own thing. Why don't we all do it together? And they can find out all of the information that they need just by my name, Jennifer Keitt, KEITT.com. Everything is there. That's the hub of everything that I'm doing. They can learn more. They can listen. They can watch. They can join. And I'd love to have them.
Oh, that's fabulous. Jennifer Keitt, and it's important to know it's KEITT.com.
Yes. .com.
Jennifer, thank you so much for being here on Business of Story. It's just been fabulous.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is great. And thank you all for listening to this edition of Business of Story. And of course, if you're looking for ways to truly own your story, because people won't buy into your personal or professional brand story until you own it first, visit businessofstory.com. We have plenty of tools there for you to download. We have our weekly podcast where you can listen to Jennifer and other amazing story artists from around the world that help you craft and tell compelling brand stories that sell. We have our workbook, our interactive workbook that you can download, complete with a video guide of yours truly, taking you through the 10 steps of the story cycle process to help you own that story. And finally, if you like what you're hearing here and you are really appreciating the kinds of guests that come to the show like Jennifer, please visit us at iTunes, share your thoughts about the story, give us a rating, and certainly share it with your world. So thank you for being here, and please join us again next week when we will have another phenomenal story artist to help you craft and tell your personal brand and professional brand story. And until next Monday, have a wonderful life.
Thanks for tuning in to The Business of Story. Don't forget there are terrific free storytelling resources for you at thebusinessofstory.com. where you'll also find the complete show archive. The Business of Story is sponsored by Emma and by Convince and Convert, and is produced by Convince and Convert Media. Find more great shows like The Business of Story at marketingpodcasts.com, the first search engine for marketing podcasts. Podcast imaging by AudioBag.